In this episode of Oddwords, I would like to touch on another game that has great fan recognition despite little content released about it. I'm of course talking about Oddwords' abandoned RTS game, The Hand of Odd. Unlike in my previous video, where I talked about Slickstorm, the details of this game are way less clear-cut. So, instead of providing a be-all end-all description of it, my goal here is to simply give an idea about what the game was and why it didn't happen, without the myths and legends that cropped up since. So, let's start with the basics. What is The Hand of Odd? As mentioned previously, it was an RTS game in development at around 2000. The idea was to use the same engine as Munch used to create a multiplayer strategy game. However, to go into details about what the game was isn't a simple task. Why? Well, because Olaf gave two quite different explanations about the game in the same issue of Dear Olaf. Can you tell me anything about The Hand of Odd other than that it is a multiplayer game that is coming after Munch's Odyssey? Hand of Odd is about us using the technology of Munch, enhancing upon it and bringing it into the multiplayer world of gaming. How many players will be able to interact at one time is still yet to be determined. If we can get 8 players at one time for Hand of Odd, we will be happy. It will be enough. If we can get more, we will be ecstatic. Hand of Odd will not be an online community in the way that EverQuest or Ultima Online are, but we do plan to take advantage of features like downloadable units that will help to keep the world fresh even after it's been out for a while. Our most important function will be speed. We'll take advantage of as much as we can until update rates become an issue. There are so many questions that relate to multiplayer internet capabilities that are yet to be answered technically that we can't look down to the degree that we would like yet. Immediately afterwards he answered the following to a different question. Can you tell us about the story and gameplay of Hand of Odd? Think eco-extremists versus corporate greed. It's Exxon versus Greenpeace, and you get to choose which one you want to be. There are 3 sides, or ideologies, wrapped into one playing field. You will be able to choose between one of the 3 master characters for 3 different races. Each of these 3 characters will have the ability to control masses of their own kind. Each of the 3 has interests that conflict with the others. It can be played competitively or cooperatively, or you can just exist and experiment while nurturing a particular world. You may choose to have full-scale conflicts or just make a lot of moolah via destroying it. We are also out for something that can be left on their own and grow while you are not even home. We are after fully persistent universes that have a life of their own. Ecosystem simulation is a big part of the next level for Oddworld games. We really want you to take ownership of your world and then deal with the inevitabilities that arise out of your behavior or your forces. It doesn't take much to realize that these two answers provide radically different ideas about the scope of the Hand of Odd. The former implies that it's gonna be a small skirmish game you can play on and off and that's it, while the later basically promises to revolutionize the genre. My proposed resolution to this conflict is that OWI themselves didn't really know what they wanted. This fits in with how they handled all the other abandoned games PR-wise, so I don't think it's unreasonable to believe that they simply weren't sure just what the Hand of Odd will be. One thing to take note of is that Alf mentions 3 races that the players could choose from. When I first read this, my immediate guesses were the Mudakans, obviously, the Glukkons with slicks and machines and such, and finally the Vikers with their flying saucers, mutants, and combat drugs. However, turns out my guess was mostly wrong. Take the following quote from Will from the Advert forums. I'm not going to give it away fully, but back when there were 3 sides, there were Glukkons, native Mudakans, and a faction based on the same inspiration behind Outlaws, although at the time they were called Meatlus, the name of which in turn went on to be inherited by something else again. And to throw in another curveball, he continues with the following. In the 5-sided concept I've read, 3 of the sides were the native Mudakans, Glukkons, and Vikors. A 4th side was yet another version of the Outlaws idea going by yet another name. So I wasn't entirely wrong after all. The Meatles he mentions were reused for another enemy later which was also cut, so please, enjoy a few pieces of concept art about them. As it is evident, there were many ideas what to make out of these beings, but ultimately none of them made the cut. As I mentioned previously, the Hand of Odd had close ties with Munch's Odyssey due to using the same engine. However, this was in fact a so much so strong bond that a lot of people mix up whether footage came from one or the other. For instance, the video playing now is titled Oddworld PS2 Beta Hand of Odd, while most of the scenes are so-called visualizations OWI created to promote Munch. Because of this, talking about what is and isn't part of the game is dangerous, and I'm not willing to bear the responsibility of unintentionally misleading people. For this reason, I will show another common source of confusion, then I will discuss what happened to the game. Fans who have been around for a long time might remember these two images. It is a very common belief that these are posters for The Hand of Odd, while they are actually promotional material for Munch's Odyssey. Another quote from Will gives us the details. I can understand your confusion. A lot of fans made the connection between play as different sides aspect and the Tree Huggers vs. Landmuggers early promotional concept for Munch's Odyssey. This has been a frustration to me for years because outwardly Oddworld inhabitants never married the two. With this you might see why it's so common for people to don't really have a clear idea of what they are talking about when they mention the Hand of Odd. Even I don't know what to think about it, despite the fact that I spent quite some time reading about Oddworld stuff. The sources are contradictory, the release material might not even be about this game, and OWI chose to remain silent. Now that I explained what the game was, it's time to talk a little about its release frame and why it was ultimately abandoned. As I mentioned, the first time the game came up was around 2000, but by 2002 the project was already shelved as evidenced by this answer from Alf. What is the story or meaning behind the two little fetuses in the Oddworld logo, Xavier? The twin fetuses have long since been absorbed into Oddworld lore. At the time we were working on two games simultaneously, Munch's Odyssey and Hand of Odd. As time went on and the gears of corporate commerce kept turning, Hand of Odd faded away and Munch's Odyssey became the sole focus of production. In the end, Oddworld gave birth to a kicking and screaming Munch's Odyssey only. This is the history of the twin fetuses. One could simply assume that this was it. They tried, they gave up, they moved on. But, similarly to what happened with Slickstorm, this wasn't the end of the story. In one of his 2011 Q&As, Alf said the following. On a final note, will Hand of Odd and Slickstorm see the light of day as games? That would be epic. Oddworld Hand of Odd will be delivering next year. By 2012 the game still hasn't come out, which prompted fans to ask about it again. Is Hand of Odd coming out this year? Nope! Hand of Odd is an ambitious project and it will take long enough just to decide what exactly we want from it. This vague answer was somewhat clarified 1 year later with the following. Regarding my Hand of Odd question, fairly simple. Is Hand of Odd a fun rumor or is it real? Thank you for your time. Hand of Odd ain't no rumor, it's a real thing that we have spent time on in the past. But for various reasons, each time it comes up, other things end up taking priority. Maybe we will go back to it one day, maybe one day we'll even release the thing. But we are not working on it right now. While Alf never outright said that the game is not happening, a third-party interview with Lorne Lanning finally sealed the Hand of Odd's figurative casket. I don't want to go too deep into it because Lanning himself recounted the story recently in his interview with Ars Technica, but long story short, this is what happened. Yes, this really happened. Not with these words, of course, but this meeting was one of the major reasons the game never came out. So yeah, moral of the story. Don't let Lorne Lanning walk into airport bathrooms, because it could end in a tragedy.